Demolition starts exactly at 6 a.m., Dad said confidently to the construction crew. Mom and my sister stood nearby, smiling as the bulldozers lined up. I walked over without rushing and handed the foreman my property deed. So you need to stop right now. You're about to tear down a house that belongs to this woman. Then everything changed. The morning air, man, it hit me like a slap to the face. Cold, damp, even through my jacket. I was standing there at the very edge of Grandma Ruth's property, watching these massive yellow machines rumble into position. It was 60 Oda's aim sharp, just like my dad had so confidently declared to the construction crew. He was there, arms sweeping, gesturing dramatically toward the old Victorian house, explaining demolition plans with a grin that made my stomach churn. My mom, she was practically bouncing, clutching her purse so tight her knuckles were white, her eyes calculating every single inch of what she saw as future profit, and Veronica, my sister, stood right beside them, arms crossed, that familiar smug expression plastered across her face, an expression I'd learned to despise, slowly, painfully, over the last 3 months. Believe it or not, they didn't even see me at first. I'd parked my car deliberately down the street, wanting to observe their little demolition celebration, their grim ritual, before I made my entrance. The bulldozers, these colossal metal beasts, were already carving deep, ugly tracks into the lawn, a lawn Grandma Ruth had meticulously cared for, tended to, loved for decades. Each tire mark, it felt like a fresh insult, like a physical assault on her memory, scaring the very ground she'd walked. We're thinking a modern design, Dad boomed to the foreman, his voice carrying easily across the dew-kissed yard. Something that'll really increase the property value. This old place has been an eyesore for years. An eyesore. Can you believe it? This house, this home that had cradled his own childhood, that had echoed with our family's laughter for 50 years, reduced to an eyesore. The foreman, a stoic-looking man, just nodded, flipping through his clipboard, probably already envisioning the next job. Veronica, of course, had her phone out, angling for the perfect shot. A before picture, I guess. I could almost see the Instagram caption forming in her: "Family triumph! Out with the old, in with the new." My mom, sunglasses firmly in place, was still scanning, her gaze cold and assessing, seeing only dollar signs where I saw generations of memories. I started walking then, my footsteps surprisingly steady against the damp grass. Funny how calm I felt. My hand instinctively went to the folder tucked securely under my arm. 3 months. 3 grueling, sleepless months. 3 months of legal battles, of countless hours spent sifting through documents, gathering evidence, meticulously preparing for this exact moment. And in that folder, one very specific, certified copy of paperwork, the kind of paperwork that would bring their little charade crashing down around them. Morning. Everyone, I called out, my voice, much to my own surprise, cutting through their excited, almost feverish chatter like a surgeon's scalpel. Dad's head snapped toward me, his face a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. Veronica's smug smile, it just evaporated like mist in the sun. And Mom? Her expression shifted from jubilant anticipation to pure, unadulterated irritation in a heartbeat. Oh, the speed of it? Honestly, I still can't wrap my head around why they thought this would be so easy. Julia? Dad said slowly, recovering his composure, forcing a strained smile. What are you doing here? We told you to stay out of family business. Family business. I repeated the phrase, letting the words hang in the crisp morning air, allowing them to soak in just a little. My voice was calm, almost dangerously. So, I stopped a few feet from the foreman, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable, caught in the crossfire of what was rapidly becoming a very public family drama. Interesting choice of words, I said, considering what you're attempting to destroy. Veronica, of course, had to step forward. Her designer heels, imported from God knows where, sank slightly into the soft earth, a perfect metaphor for her grasp on reality. You need to leave, she hissed, her eyes blazing. This property belongs to Mom and Dad now. Grandma's will was clear, was it? I turned my attention fully to the foreman then. Sir, I said, my voice firm but polite, I need you to stop everything immediately. You're about to destroy property that doesn't belong to the people who hired you. The foreman, bless his heart, glanced nervously between me and my father. Uncertainty etched itself across his weathered face, a roadmap of a man who knew trouble when he saw it. Ma'am, I have a contract signed by. I understand what you have. I interrupted gently, already opening my folder, pulling out the pristine, certified copy. But before you proceed, I think you should see this. I handed him the deed, freshly updated, legally certified. His eyes, wait, let that sink in. His eyes widened as he scanned the document. He saw Grandma Ruth's signature. And right next to it, my signature, the date stamp on that deed. 2 years prior, 2 whole years before her death, 2 whole years before my parents even had a clue, they'd been quietly, definitively written out of her original will. This deed transfers ownership to Julia Margaret Foster upon Ruth Elizabeth Foster's death. The foreman read aloud, his voice now a barely audible whisper. He looked up directly at my father. Sir, this changes everything. I can't demolish a house when ownership is disputed. There's no dispute, I said, my voice like steel. That deed is legally binding. I've had it verified by 3 separate attorneys. My grandmother transferred this property to me 24 months before she passed away. She knew exactly what she was doing. My dad's face, it flushed a furious dark red. The color spread down his neck, a telltale sign of his simmering rage. That's impossible! He sputtered. Mother left everything to us in her will. We saw the document ourselves. You saw the document? Dated 4 years ago? I corrected him, my voice still unnervingly calm. What you didn't know is that Grandma Ruth created a trust 2 years ago, transferring the property outside of probate. The house never even entered the estate, which means for this particular asset, your will is completely irrelevant. Now, let's talk about cognitive dissonance for a moment. This is a fascinating psychological phenomenon where people hold 2 or more conflicting beliefs, ideas, or values. To reduce the discomfort of this conflict, they might change their beliefs, deny the evidence, or rationalize their actions. My parents, in this moment, were experiencing it in spades. They had a deeply held belief that they were the rightful, deserving heirs. The evidence I presented directly contradicted that. Instead of reconsidering their perception of Grandma, they would instinctively seek to discredit me or rationalize her actions as manipulated or confused. It's a powerful, almost unconscious defense mechanism against uncomfortable truths, and it was about to play out right before my eyes. Mom rushed forward then, her voice shrill, cutting through the crisp morning air like a broken siren. You manipulated an old woman! She was confused. Probably didn't understand what she was signing. Grandma Ruth was sharper than any of us until her final week. I shot back the anger finally starting to bubble to the surface. And she had 3 witnesses present when she signed that deed, including her attorney of 40 years and her physician, both of whom attested to her complete mental competency. Do you really want to challenge their professional assessments in court? The foreman, bless his soul, took a noticeable step backward, clearly wanting as much distance as possible from this escalating family explosion. His crew, wise men, stayed in their vehicles, watching the whole spectacle unfold through their windshields, probably placing bets on who would crack first. Veronica, ever the opportunist, lunged for the deed, but I was quicker, pulling it back smoothly, almost effortlessly. That's a certified copy, I informed her, a wry twist to my lips. The original is locked in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, along with, I paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air, along with video testimony from Grandma Ruth herself explaining exactly why she made this decision. Wait, let that sink in. Video testimony, Dad's voice, which had been so booming just moments ago, cracked. Video testimony, what are you talking about? This moment, I had waited for this. Rehearsed these words, mentally at least, during countless sleepless nights when the sheer audacity of their greed kept me wide awake. Grandma Ruth, I began, my voice clear and steady, recorded a 30-minute statement explaining her reasoning. She detailed every single conversation where you pressured her to sell this house, Every time you suggested she move into assisted living so you could access her assets, every dismissive comment about her being too old to manage her own affairs, the silence that followed was heavy. It wasn't just the three of them holding their breath. Even the construction crew seemed to be frozen, sensing the seismic shift in the atmosphere. You could feel the weight of what I just revealed. A truth bomb detonated in the placid morning. "You're lying," Mom hissed, her face contorted. "Ruth would never do something like that. We were her favorite children." "She only had 2 children," I countered, the words coming out harsher than I'd intended. But you know what? I didn't regret them. Not one bit. And you were definitely not the favorite. Grandma spent her final years watching you circle like vultures, waiting for her to die so you could sell everything she built. Did you think she didn't notice? Did you imagine she was blind to your constant hints about property values and development opportunities? Dad's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw working. "We had every right to discuss our mother's estate planning. That's what responsible children do." "Responsible children don't ignore their mother's wishes," I retorted, my gaze unwavering. Then, turning back to the foreman, I shifted my tone, making it level and professional again. "Sir, if you proceed with this demolition, you'll be destroying private property without owner consent. I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action against your company, and I have documentation proving you were warned before beginning work." The foreman looked down at his clipboard, then at my father, then back at the deed still in his hands. Years of construction experience, I imagine, had taught him to recognize a legal landmine when he saw one. "I'm going to need verification before we continue," he said carefully, pulling out his phone. "This is beyond my authority to resolve. I'll have to contact the property lawyer listed on our work order." "Good idea," I agreed. "While you're making calls, you might also want to contact the county clerk's office. They can confirm the deed transfer and the trust documentation. Everything is properly filed and recorded." Veronica's face, which usually boasted a flawless, carefully applied mask of makeup, had gone distinctly pale. "Dad, do something? She can't just waltz in here and stop everything." "I'm not stopping anything," I corrected her, a slight smile touching my lips. "I'm preventing the illegal demolition of my property. There's a significant difference." Mom pulled out her own phone, frantically dialing. Probably their attorney, the one who'd so confidently assured them the will was ironclad and Grandma's estate would transfer smoothly. Honestly, I almost felt a pang of sympathy for that lawyer, about to receive a very uncomfortable call about documents he'd apparently failed to discover during his estate review. If you've ever had that moment of knowing someone else's professional life is about to get a whole lot harder because of a family drama, let me know in the comments. It's a weird kind of satisfaction. "How long have you known?" Dad asked, his voice softer now, his anger shifting, evolving into something more calculated, more dangerous. "How long have you been sitting on this information?" "Since the day Grandma signed the papers," I answered honestly, meeting his gaze. "She called me that afternoon, told me what she'd done and why. She made me promise not to mention it unless you tried something like this." "Something like what?" Veronica demanded, ever indignant. "We're family. We're trying to make good business decisions with inherited property. You're trying to erase Grandma's legacy." I shot back, the words biting. She built this house with Grandpa Frank 50 years ago. They raised their family here, celebrated holidays here, created memories in every single room. And you wanted to bulldoze it all for a quick profit?" Veronica scoffed, her perfectly manicured nails catching the morning sunlight as she made a dismissive gesture. "Oh, please spare us the sentimental garbage. That house is falling apart. The foundation needs work. The roof leaks and the electrical system is ancient. We'd be doing everyone a favor by tearing it down." Funny, I mused, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips, how that foundation seemed sturdy enough when you held your engagement party here 5 years ago, or when you borrowed Grandma's dining room for your anniversary dinner last year because the restaurant you wanted was fully booked. The house was good enough when you needed something from it, wasn't it? Mom stepped between us then, her voice taking on that saccharine, condescending tone I remembered so vividly from childhood negotiations. Julia, sweetheart, she purred, you're being unreasonable. We understand you're emotional about losing Ruth, but you need to accept reality. The property is worth over $1 million. We could split that money, help you with your teaching salary, give you opportunities you'd never have otherwise. I don't want opportunities bought with Grandma's demolished home, I replied steadily, my voice firm, and my teaching salary supports me just fine, thank you very much. Dad, ever the strategist, tried a different approach. His expression shifted to something he probably thought looked paternal and concerned. Think about your future, Julia. What happens when you want to buy your own place, when you want to start a family? This money could change your life. Grandma already changed my life, I said, the words coming from the heart. She taught me that some things matter more than money. Apparently, that's a lesson you never learned. The foreman was still on his phone, speaking in low, hushed tones while watching our family implosion with an almost clinical detachment. His crew had exited their vehicles now, standing in a loose cluster, doing their best not to obviously eavesdrop, but you could tell they were hanging on every word. Veronica pulled up something on her phone, shoving it toward my face. Look at this. I already found a developer who will pay $3 million for the lot. Cash offer closes in 30 days. That's over 400,000 for each of you too. She gestured at my parents. You've already been shopping the property, I said, disgust heavy in my voice. Grandma's been dead for 3 months and you're actively negotiating sales behind my back. We're being proactive, Mom defended, her voice sharp. Someone has to think practically about these matters. You're so busy being sentimental that you can't see the smart business decision right in front of you. The smart decision, I repeated slowly, anger building, hot and righteous in my chest. Let me tell you about smart decisions. 2 years ago, when Grandma first mentioned she was worried about what would happen to her house, I suggested we all sit down as a family and discuss her wishes. Do you remember what you said, Dad? His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. You said Grandma was getting paranoid in her old age. I continued, my voice gaining strength. You told me to stop encouraging her morbid thoughts. Then you turned around and started pressure her to consider selling while the market was hot. You brought real estate agents to Sunday dinners. You left property valuation reports on her kitchen table. We were helping her understand her options. Dad protested, his voice rising again. You were terrorizing her. I countered. She called me crying after you brought the agent to Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving, Dad! You couldn't even give her a holiday without turning it into a sales pitch. Mom's face flushed with indignation. That's a complete exaggeration. We simply mentioned that Margaret's son works in real estate and thought he could provide a free assessment. Ruth completely overreacted. She didn't overreact, I said, my voice cutting. She finally understood what you really cared about. I turned my gaze to Veronica, and you were even worse, bringing your interior designer friends over to comment on how outdated everything was, suggesting Grandma would be so much happier in a modern condo somewhere. You measured rooms for renovation while she was still living there. Veronica, for once, had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I was trying to help her envision possibilities. The place needed updating. The place needed respect, I said firmly, which none of you were capable of providing. The foreman, finally finished with his call, approached our group cautiously, like a wary sailor wading into dangerous waters. He addressed me directly. My supervisor confirms that we cannot proceed with any demolition until ownership is legally verified through the county. He recommends all parties involved retain legal counsel and resolve this through proper channels. Already done, I assured him, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. My attorney has been handling this situation for months. Dad's eyes widened, a dawning horror spreading across his features. Months? You've had a lawyer working on this for months? Since 2 weeks after Grandma died, I confirmed, when Veronica let slip at the funeral reception that you were already getting demolition quotes. Remember that, V? You were 3 glasses of wine deep, bragging to cousin Patricia about your big plans for development. Patricia called me that night, concerned about what she'd heard. Veronica's face went even paler. That was a private conversation. At a funeral reception with 50 people present, I reminded her. Not exactly private, is it? But it confirmed what I'd suspected, that you were already plotting before Grandma was even buried. Mom grabbed Dad's arm, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper, though it carried clearly in the suddenly quiet air.
Gerald! Call Stephen right now! We need our lawyer on this immediately!
Stephen's on vacation in the Bahamas, Dad muttered, looking defeated. Won't be back for another week. Then call his partner. Call someone. Mom's composure was finally cracking, her carefully maintained facade showing stress fractures like thin ice giving way. I pulled additional documents from my folder, holding them where everyone could see. While you're making calls, I announced, you should know that I've also filed preliminary paperwork to have this property designated as a historical landmark. The house was built in 1975, making it 50 years old and eligible for protection under the state's Century Preservation Act. You did what? Dad looked like I just slapped him across the face. The application is pending review. I continued, my voice steady, but once approved, any demolition or substantial alteration would require special permits and historical society approval. Even if you somehow contested the deed successfully, which you won't, you still couldn't tear down the house without committing a criminal offense. Veronica, truly unhinged now, lunged toward me, her designer bag swinging wildly. You vindictive little... Careful, I warned, stepping back smoothly, instinctively, putting just enough distance between us. We have witnesses here, and I'm happy to add assault charges to the growing list of reasons you should leave my property. The construction foreman, bless his sturdy frame, moved between us, his bulk creating an effective, much-needed barrier. Ladies, I think everyone needs to calm down. Ma'am, he looked at my parents, his voice firm. My crew is leaving now. You'll need to sort this out through legal means. We can't be involved in family disputes. This isn't a dispute, Dad insisted, his voice rising, indignant.
This is fraud!
My daughter is trying to steal her grandmother's property through forged documents and manipulation. Those are serious accusations, I said calmly, meeting his enraged gaze. Accusations that could constitute slander if you repeat them publicly without evidence. My attorney would be very interested in adding defamation to our list of potential countersuits. Mom pressed her hands to her temples, a theatrical gesture of distress.
This is insane! Ruth wouldn't have cut us out of her most valuable asset. She loved us.
She did love you, I agreed, and my voice softened despite my anger, a flicker of genuine sadness in my tone. And that's what made your behavior so heartbreaking for her. She wanted you to love her back for who she was, not for what she owned. She kept hoping you'd realize what you were doing, how you were making her feel like a burden instead of a mother. We never made her feel like a burden, Dad protested, but his voice lacked conviction, a hollow sound. Really? I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a voice memo I'd saved. Grandma started recording conversations in her final year. She wanted documentation, evidence of what was really happening versus what you'd claim later. Would you like to hear the one from last April? The blood, I swear, drained from Mom's face.
That's illegal, she gasped.
Recording people without consent is perfectly legal in this state, as long as one party knows about it. I interrupted, my finger poised over the play button. Grandma was that party. And before you ask, yes, my attorney has reviewed everything. It's all admissible in court if needed. I pressed play, and Grandma Ruth's voice, clear and resonant, filled the quiet morning air. The recording quality was surprisingly good. I'd helped her learn to use that little digital recorder. Ruth, we've discussed this a dozen times. Dad's voice came through clearly, impatient, dismissive. The house is too much for you to maintain. The property taxes alone are eating up your fixed income. If you sell now, you could move somewhere easier to manage and have money left over for your final years. This is my home, Gerald. Grandma's recorded voice sounded tired, defeated. Frank and I built our life here. You grew up in these rooms? Doesn't that mean anything to you? Of course it means something, Dad replied, but his tone suggested otherwise. But sentiment doesn't pay bills. Be practical, Mother. You are 84 years old. How much longer do you really think you can handle stairs and yard work? I manage just fine with Julia's help. Julia's enabling your stubbornness. Mom's voice joined the conversation, sharp and critical. She should be in encouraging you to make smart decisions instead of clinging to the past. This house is falling apart around you. Ruth, the smart thing would be selling while you still can, before something major breaks and costs a fortune to fix. The roof was replaced 3 years ago. Grandma said quietly. The furnace is only 5 years old. Julia helped me update the plumbing last summer. The house is in excellent condition. For now, Veronica chimed in, her voice dismissive. But at your age, who knows how long you'll be able to maintain it? We're trying to help you plan ahead, Grandma. Why can't you see that? I see that my family wants my house more than they want my happiness. Grandma's voice cracked slightly. I see that you measure my worth in property values and development potential.
That's unfair, Dad protested. We're thinking about your welfare.
Are you? Grandma asked, her voice laced with pain. Or are you thinking about your inheritance? The recording continued for another minute, documenting more of the same relentless pressure tactics, the same dismissive attitudes. When I finally stopped playback, the silence was deafening. Nobody spoke. Even the construction crew, those hardened men, looked profoundly uncomfortable, shifting their weight and pointedly avoiding eye contact. There are 17 more recordings, I said into that heavy silence, my voice cutting through the tension. Different dates, different conversations, all following the exact same pattern. Grandma documented everything because she knew this day would come. She knew you challenged her decisions and claimed she was incompetent or manipulated. So she built an airtight case, proving she understood exactly what she was doing and why. Now, this is where we see the power of evidence-based decision-making meeting familial bias. Grandma Ruth, recognizing the inherent conflict of interest and the emotional manipulation she was facing, meticulously gathered irrefutable proof. This wasn't about vindictiveness, it was about protecting her autonomy and her legacy in the face of what she anticipated would be relentless attempts to undermine her wishes. She understood that without concrete evidence, her words against theirs would be dismissed, particularly given the perceived power dynamics within the family. It's a masterclass in strategic foresight against anticipated gaslighting. Dad's shoulders, which had been so broad and confident hours ago, sagged. Some of the fight, some of that aggressive bluster, just drained from his posture. We weren't trying to hurt her, he mumbled, almost to himself. We genuinely thought she'd be better off in a more manageable situation. You thought you'd be better off with access to her assets, I corrected, my voice firm. There's a difference. And deep down, you know it. Grandma knew it, too. That's why she took steps to protect the one thing she valued most. The foreman cleared his throat, an awkward, nervous sound. We're gonna head out now. This is way beyond anything my crew should be involved in. He handed my father a business card. When you get legal clearance, if you get legal clearance, you can call to reschedule. But I'll be honest, sir, I don't think that's going to happen. The construction vehicles rumbled to life, the roar of diesel filling the air as they slowly, carefully, backed out of the driveway and down the street. Within minutes, the property was quiet again, eerily so, except for our family's fractured, strained silence. Veronica, looking utterly deflated, sank onto the porch steps, her fight seemingly exhausted. What do you want, Julia? She whispered, her voice devoid of its usual sharp edge. Is this about money? We could arrange a payment, compensate you for giving up your claim. You still don't understand, I said, shaking my head, a deep sigh escaping my lips. This isn't about money. I don't want your compensation. I want Grandma's house to remain standing, to be loved and maintained the way she intended. I want her memory honored instead of demolished for profit. So, we get nothing. Mom's voice was bitter, dripping with resentment. Your grandmother's most valuable asset goes entirely to you while we're supposed to just accept it? You'll get everything else? I reminded them, trying to keep my voice level. Her savings, her investment accounts, her personal belongings, except for what she specifically left to me. That's still substantial. But yes, the house is mine and is staying mine. Dad pulled out his own phone, scrolling through contacts, a flicker of that calculated anger returning to his eyes. I'm calling our lawyer anyway. Stephen, vacation or not, his firm needs to handle this. Call whoever you want, I said, shrugging slightly. But before you spend thousands on legal fees fighting a battle you'll lose, maybe consider what Grandma would think of that choice. More money wasted on trying to override her wishes instead of accepting them. Don't lecture us about what Mother would want. Dad snapped, his voice sharp with renewed anger. You're not the authority on her thoughts and feelings. Actually, I am, I countered, pulling out one more document. This one. A letter carefully folded in Grandma's own unmistakable handwriting. She wrote this specifically for today, for this moment. She predicted you'd show up with bulldozers, and she wanted you to understand why she made her choice. Mom stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the letter with something that looked suspiciously like dread. When did she write that? 6 months before she died, I answered. She was clear-minded, healthy, and absolutely certain about her decision. She sealed it in an envelope with instructions for me to open it only if you attempted demolition. Veronica stood up from the porch steps, brushing dirt from her expensive pants, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. This is all very dramatic, Julia, but you're not painting an accurate picture. We weren't monsters. We visited Grandma regularly. Regularly, I repeated, letting the word hang between us, thick with unspoken meaning. Twice a month for an hour counts as regular to you? I was here 3 afternoons every week. I knew what medications she took, what time she liked her tea, which television show she never missed. Can any of you tell me what her favorite book was? Silence. Crushing, deafening silence. It was To Kill a Mockingbird, I continued, my voice now laced with a deep, weary sadness. She reread it every spring. Can you name her best friend from the neighborhood? More silence. They couldn't. Dorothy Chen, I supplied, who lived 2 streets over. They had coffee together every Tuesday morning for 23 years. Grandma attended Dorothy's funeral last year, and not one of you came with her. Not one of you supported her through losing her closest friend. My voice was getting stronger now. Years of suppressed frustration finally finding release, a dam breaking. You didn't know her daily life because you never bothered to be part of it. Dad's face darkened, a new kind of resentment brewing.
We had our own lives to manage, Julia. Jobs, responsibilities, commitments. Not everyone has summers off like teachers do.
Don't you dare, I warned, my anger flashing hot, raw. I spent my summers helping Grandma with projects you promised to handle and never did. That roof replacement you said you'd coordinate. I found the contractors, got the quotes, supervised the work. The garden renovation you claimed you'd help with, I spent 2 months working alongside her, planting and weeding. Every promise you made and broke, I picked up the pieces. Mom's expression shifted to something defensive, her chin jutting out.
We offered to hire people to help her. Professional services that would have done everything properly.
She didn't want strangers in her home doing work her family should have cared enough to help with. I shot back, the words like arrows. She wanted connection, not transactions. But you couldn't understand that because you measure everything in dollars and convenience. Veronica pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes, though I saw no actual tears, just a performative show of distress. You're making us sound heartless?
And that's not fair. We loved Grandma.
Did you? I challenged, my gaze sweeping over all 3 of them. Or did you love what she represented? The inheritance waiting in the wings, the property value that increased every year, the financial security her death would provide? Because from where I stood, your love looked suspiciously like an investment strategy.
That's enough,
Dad said sharply, finally finding his voice, albeit a shaky one.
You're crossing a line.
I crossed the line. I laughed then, a short, bitter sound even to my own ears. You showed up here at 6 in the morning with demolition equipment, ready to destroy a home where your mother lived for 50 years, and I'm the one crossing lines. The foreman, who'd been maintaining a respectful distance during our family implosion, shifted uncomfortably. His crew had retreated to their trucks, clearly wanting no part of this confrontation, an illustration of what's often called the bystander effect. While typically associated with emergencies where people fail to act due to the presence of others, here it's almost inverted. The bystanders were actively removing themselves from a situation they recognized as profoundly unethical and legally treacherous, demonstrating a conscious refusal to participate in the moral fallout. They knew this wasn't just a job anymore. Mom tried a different approach, her voice softening into that manipulative sweetness I recognized from childhood negotiations. Julia, honey, I know you're upset. Grief makes people act in ways they normally wouldn't, but you need to think clearly about this situation. Maintaining this house will be expensive. Property, taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs. It's a massive financial burden for someone on a teacher's income. I've already calculated the costs, I informed her coolly. Grandma left me a detailed budget showing all expenses. She also left a separate fund specifically designated for house maintenance. Everything's planned for, accounted for, and fully funded for the next 10 years. Minimum. Dad's eyes narrowed, ever focused on the numbers. How much money are we talking about? That's none of your business, I replied. The maintenance fund exists outside the estate. It's not part of your inheritance calculation. Veronica stepped forward aggressively, her composure completely gone.
Of course it is! Any money Mother had should be divided equally among her heirs.
You can't just hide assets in separate accounts. I'm not hiding anything, I said calmly. Grandma established a home maintenance trust 2 years ago, completely separate from her estate. It was legally created, properly documented, and specifically excluded from probate. My attorney verified everything months ago. Your attorney? Mom spat the words like they tasted bad. How are you even affording an attorney?
Legal representation costs thousands of dollars.
I smiled slightly then, a genuine smile that felt good, a small victory. Grandma arranged that too. She retained Richard Chen on a prepaid basis specifically to handle any challenges to her property transfer. He's already been compensated for his work, which means I can fight your legal challenges indefinitely without spending a cent. The information hit them like physical blows. I watched the realization dawn across all three faces simultaneously. Grandma Ruth had anticipated every single move, blocked every strategy, prepared for every objection. She had built a fortress around her wishes that they couldn't breach, no matter how hard they tried. This level of foresight, this meticulous planning, isn't just about legal savvy, it's a profound act of self-advocacy and legacy protection. Grandma, understanding the avarice and disregard she faced, proactively ensured her desires would be honored, transforming a potentially devastating family conflict into an unassailable declaration of her will. She gave her own memory a voice when she knew others would try to silence it for profit. She really thought of everything. Veronica whispered, sinking back onto the porch steps finally, truly defeated. She spent 2 years planning, I confirmed. 2 years watching your behavior, documenting your priorities, and making absolutely certain her home would be protected after her death. She consulted estate lawyers, property attorneys, and financial advisors. She left nothing to chance. Dad's phone rang, shattering the heavy silence. He answered it, walking a few steps away for privacy. I heard fragments of his conversation: Stephen's partner, emergency consultation, property dispute. When he returned, his expression had shifted from angry to coldly calculating. Our attorney says we have grounds to contest based on undue influence, he announced, a desperate attempt to regain control. If we can prove you manipulated Mother during a period of diminished capacity, the property transfer becomes voidable. Good luck with that, I said. Grandma had cognitive assessments from 3 different physicians confirming her mental competency at the time of transfer. She also underwent a psychiatric evaluation specifically to preempt that exact challenge. Dr. Patricia Hammond, Dr. Elizabeth Winters, and Dr. Franklin Shaw all documented her complete understanding of her decisions and the legal implications. Mom's face went utterly pale. 3 doctors? Why would she need 3 doctors to confirm something that should be obvious? Because she knew you'd try anything to get this property, I explained, my voice flat, devoid of emotion now. She predicted you'd claim incompetence, coercion, manipulation, whatever legal theory might cast doubt on her choices. So she built an evidence mountain that no court would ignore. I unfolded the letter then, the crisp paper rustling softly. My voice, as I began to read, was steady, carrying Grandma's final words into the stunned silence. My dearest Gerald, Evelyn, and Veronica, if you're hearing these words, it means you've attempted to demolish my home despite Julia's rightful ownership. I hoped it wouldn't come to this. Hoped you'd respect my final wishes, but I know my children better than they think I do. You see opportunity where you should see legacy. You see profit where you should see memory. This house is more than real estate. It's the physical embodiment of 50 years of love, laughter, family, and life. Your father and I chose every fixture, painted every wall, planted every tree in the yard. Julia understands that. She values what we built, not what it's worth. That's why she's the right person to inherit this place. I don't hate you for wanting money. I understand that security matters, but I needed to know someone would preserve what Frank and I created. And Julia is that someone. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Accept my choice with grace and dignity. Let the house stand. Let Julia honor our family's history the way it deserves, with love and disappointment. Ruth. The silence after I finished reading was crushing, heavy. It felt like the air itself had been sucked out of the space. Mom wiped at her eyes, though whether from sadness or anger, I couldn't tell. Dad stared at the house, really seeing it for the first time, not as an asset, but as a home. Veronica remained on the steps, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking. She thought we'd do this. Veronica whispered, her voice raw. She predicted it exactly because she knew you, I said gently, a profound sadness settling over me. She hoped she was wrong, but she knew. The foreman cleared his throat, breaking the spell. My supervisor says we're shutting down operations until ownership is legally confirmed. Mom, he nodded toward me. You'll need to provide copies of your documentation to our legal department. I have everything prepared, I assured him, pulling business cards from my folder. This is my attorney's information. He's expecting your call and has complete copies of all relevant documents ready for your review. The foreman signaled his crew, making those decisive cutting gestures across his throat. Engines shut off one by one, leaving a sudden, profound quiet across the property. Birds, as if released from a trance, started singing again, their voices filling the space where the diesel rumbles had been. Dad stared at the now silent bulldozers, his expression unreadable, a complex tapestry of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. You thought of everything, haven't you? A grandma thought of everything, I corrected, looking towards the stately Victorian. I just followed her instructions. She knew you'd try this eventually. She predicted you'd wait until after her funeral. Give yourselves a few weeks to seem respectful, then move fast before anyone could object. That's not Mom started, but I cut her off. She wrote it all down. Dated entries in her journal describing conversations where you discussed demolition plans, where you calculated lot value, where you debated whether the historical designation would complicate quick sales. She documented everything. Veronica's phone, which she'd been clutching, slipped from her hands, landing in the grass with a soft thud, thud. The sound was so small, yet so definitive. Grandma kept journals for 60 years, I confirmed. Beautiful leather, bound books filled with her thoughts, observations, and detailed accounts of family interactions. She left them all to me, along with explicit permission to use them as evidence if needed. The construction crew, clearly relieved to escape the raw, messy family drama, began packing their equipment with a renewed sense of purpose. Their foreman handed back my deed carefully, almost reverently, as though afraid it might explode if mishandled. We'll be in touch once legal issues are resolved, he said, already walking toward his truck. Have your attorney contact our office? Within 10 minutes, the yard was empty of machinery. Deep tire tracks, stark and ugly, remained in the lawn, a visceral reminder of how close they'd come to destroying everything. I stood in the sudden, vast quiet, facing 3 family members who now looked like utter strangers. What happens now? Dad asked finally, his voice stripped of its earlier bluster, echoing hollowly. "Oh, now I move into my house," I said simply, the words feeling both monumental and utterly natural. "I'll renovate it according to Grandma's wishes, preserving the original character while updating the infrastructure." She left detailed plans, actually sketches of what she imagined the place could become. You're gonna live here?" Mom sounded utterly horrified. "In this old dump?" This home, I emphasized the word, letting it resonate with the weight of its meaning, represents 5 decades of love and family history. Just because you can't see value beyond dollar signs doesn't mean it's worthless. Veronica retrieved her phone from the grass, smudging dirt across its screen. "What about the rest of the estate? Are you claiming everything?" "I'm claiming what Grandma Ruth explicitly left to me," I answered. "The house, the property it sits on, and her personal effects. The rest of the estate, her financial accounts, investments, and other assets, those follow the will you're so familiar with. You'll still inherit plenty." Dad's eyes narrowed, that calculating glint returning. "But you get the property, the single most valuable piece of her estate." "I get the home she wanted preserved," I corrected. "And yes, it happens to be valuable." She understood that when she made her decision. She also understood that you'd never maintain it, never honor what it represented. You'd see potential profit and nothing else. Mom straightened her shoulders, a valiant, if futile, attempt to regain some dignity. "We could contest this, fight the transfer in court." "You could try," I agreed, a slight shrug. "My attorney estimates that legal battle would cost you about $200,000, take approximately 18 months, and you'd lose. Grandma's documentation is bulletproof, but if you want to spend your inheritance on lawyer fees, that's certainly your choice." The threat hung in the air between us, palpable. I could see them calculating, weighing costs against potential gains, trying to determine if pride was truly worth the financial risk. This entire situation is a powerful example of resource allocation based on deeply ingrained values. My parents consistently prioritized immediate financial gain and control over the intangible value of family legacy and emotional connection. Grandma, however, strategically allocated her resources, her time, her foresight, her legal planning, and ultimately her assets to protect what she valued, the sanctity of her home and its memories, ensuring they would endure beyond her lifetime, even if it meant disinheriting those who couldn't see past the balance sheet. Why did she do this? Dad asked, and for the first time that morning, he sounded genuinely hurt rather than angry. It was a raw question, one born of confused pain. "I'm her son? We took care of her. Did you?" I kept my voice gentle, remembering Grandma's tears when she'd first told me about their pressure tactics, the coldness in their voices. "You visited twice a month, stayed for an hour, spent most of that time discussing her finances. You called once a week, conversations that lasted maybe 10 minutes. Meanwhile, you made it clear she was a burden, someone whose continued independence inconvenienced your plans."
That's not fair.
Veronica protested, her voice weak. "We were concerned about her safety. You were concerned about her assets," I countered, my voice unwavering. "There's a difference, and Grandma was smart enough to recognize it. I visited 3 times a week. I called every evening. I took her to doctor appointments, helped with grocery shopping, spent hours listening to her stories, not because I wanted her money, but because I loved her company." Dad looked toward the house, his expression complicated, a mixture of shame, regret, and something akin to dawning realization. "She talked about you constantly." "Julia did this." Julia said that. "We thought she was just being sentimental. She was recognizing the difference between genuine care and calculated interest," I said quietly. "I'm sorry you can't see that distinction." Mom gathered her purse, her movements abrupt, clearly ready to flee. "Come on, Gerald. We're not wanted here. You were wanted, I told them, meaning it, my voice aching with a deep personal sorrow. Grandma hoped until the end that you'd change, that you'd start valuing her for who she was rather than what she owned. She gave you chances, documented every opportunity you missed, but you were too focused on future profits to appreciate present relationships. Veronica headed toward their car without another word, a figure of utter defeat. Mom followed, her heels clicking sharply against the driveway, a sound that somehow punctuated the end of this chapter. Dad lingered, though studying the house again, like he was seeing its true essence for the very first time. She really recorded everything? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Everything, I confirmed. There's a video of her explaining her decision, shot by a professional videographer with her attorney present. She's clear, articulate, and absolutely certain about her choices. Watching it breaks my heart, but it also makes me proud of her courage. Can I see it? The question surprised me, caught me off guard. The video, I'd like to hear what she said. I considered his request carefully. Maybe someday, I said, drawing a soft boundary after you've had time to process this, after you've done some genuine reflection about your relationship with her. Right now, I think it would just make you angry. He nodded slowly, accepting the boundary, a rare moment of humility. You're probably right. He paused, seeming to gather courage for a final statement. For what it's worth, I think she chose correctly. You'll take care of this place, probably. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was something. I watched their car disappear down the street. The sound of the engine fading, leaving me alone with the house and my swirling thoughts. The Victorian stood exactly as it had for 5 decades, its wraparound porch slightly weathered, its painted trim needing touch-ups, its windows reflecting the morning sunlight in patterns Grandma had loved. I climbed the front steps slowly, running my hand along the familiar, smooth railing inside. Everything remained untouched since her death. The furniture she'd carefully selected over the years, the photographs documenting our family history, the grand piano she played every evening. I sat on her favorite chair, the one positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon light through the bay windows. My phone buzzed, a text from my attorney. Heard from the construction company. They formally withdrawn from the contract and issued refunds to your parents. Your father's attorney called requesting copies of all documentation, sending everything over this afternoon. You did it? I did it? But really, Grandma Ruth did it? With her incredible foresight, her meticulous planning, and her unwavering determination to protect what mattered most. Together, we protected something truly valuable, something that measured worth in memories and love rather than just market prices. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and whispers. I'd spent countless afternoons here as a child, learning to bake in Grandma's kitchen, getting lost in her library, listening to stories about her own childhood in this very space. Now, these rooms were mine to preserve, mine to maintain, mine to eventually pass along to someone who would understand their true value. My parents would receive their inheritance, I guess, enough money to fund comfortable retirements. Veronica would get her share, probably spending it on things that depreciated rapidly, chasing the next fleeting trend. They'd move on, I suppose, finding new investments and opportunities to pursue. But I'd have this, Grandma Ruth's legacy, her history, her home. Every morning, I'd wake up in rooms she'd loved, walk on floors she'd polished, look through windows she'd gazed through while dreaming about her family's future. The demolition that almost happened would become a family legend, a cautionary tale about boundaries and consequences. Perhaps someday, Dad would watch Grandma's video testimony and truly understand what he'd lost. Perhaps Mom and Veronica would realize that relationships matter infinitely more than real estate values. Or perhaps they wouldn't. Some people, and this is the sad truth, never learn to see beyond profit margins and property assessments, but that ultimately is their loss, not mine. I stood up, heading toward the kitchen to make tea using Grandma's favorite kettle. The house needed work, yes. Updated electrical, modern plumbing, fresh paint throughout, but I would take my time, doing renovations thoughtfully, honoring what existed, while carefully introducing improvements. Outside, the torn lawn would need repair. I'd plant new grass over those brutal bulldozer tracks, meticulously erasing the evidence of the destruction that almost occurred. By summer, the yard would be perfect again, ready for the sprawling garden Grandma had always envisioned. This was my inheritance, not just a house, but a profound responsibility, a sacred trust to preserve the love that had shaped these walls. Every decision I made, every brushstroke, every planted seed, would honor her memory, protect her legacy, and ensure that future generations understood what she valued most. The bulldozers were gone, the threat had passed, and my home, stood resilient, a testament to a love that was stronger than any amount of greed. Moral lesson: this story, at its core, is a poignant reminder that true wealth isn't measured in square footage or market value, but in the intangible legacies we build through love, connection, and respect for one another. It's about recognizing that some things, some memories, some spaces are simply invaluable, and protecting them often requires an unexpected amount of courage and foresight. Controversial question: if you were Grandma Ruth, knowing the hearts of your children, would you have chosen to disinherit them from your most cherished asset, or would you have hoped, perhaps naively, that love would eventually conquer greed? And does protecting a legacy, even against your own family, ever truly justify the emotional cost?